Emeka, he said, your name came up several times this quarter in performance reviews. People notice your dedication. I want to make sure we are taking care of our strongest contributors. I trust the performance bonus we approved in September reached you well.
Then slowly, without planning it, without thinking about consequences or timing or the 11 other people watching at Femi Adeyemi.
What bonus?
This is not just a story, it is truth. Listen closely.
The restaurant was the kind of place where the forks cost more than my weekly groceries. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, waiters who moved like shadows. Our CEO, Mr. Adaora Obi, had reserved the entire private dining room for the annual performance dinner. 12 of us sat around the long table. I was the only one wearing a suit I had bought 3 years ago. I could feel the fabric pulling slightly at my shoulders. I had been at Pinnacle Solutions for 4 years. 4 years of early mornings and late nights. 4 years of fixing problems that were not mine to fix, covering gaps that nobody acknowledged, and delivering results that somehow always looked better on someone else's report. My name is Emeka Jiru. I am a senior data analyst. Or at least, that is what my contract says. My direct boss, Mr. Femi Adeyemi, sat 2 seats to my left. He was laughing at something the head of marketing said. His watch caught the candlelight every time he moved his wrist. I remember thinking he looked very relaxed for a man who had spent the past month submitting my work under his own name. The evening had barely begun. Mr. Obi stood up, raised his glass, and smiled at the table. Tonight, he said, is about recognizing the people who truly move this company forward. I lifted my glass with everyone else. My hand was steady. My chest was not. The dinner moved slowly. Course after course arrived. Conversations floated around the table like warm smoke. People talked about quarterly numbers, upcoming projects, holiday plans. I mostly listened. That has always been my way. I listen more than I speak. My mother used to say that quiet people see everything. She was right. Femi kept glancing at me between bites. Small, quick looks. The kind a person gives when they are checking whether a door they locked is still locked. I pretended not to notice. I have had 4 years of practice at that too. About halfway through the main course, Mr. Obi leaned forward and began speaking about the Hartwell account. My chest tightened immediately. The Hartwell account was the biggest thing our department had handled all year. A full market analysis, predictive modeling, and a client presentation strategy. It had taken me 11 weeks to build from scratch. Femi had presented it to the board. Femi had received the applause. I had received nothing. Not even a mention in the department email that went out afterward. Mr. Obi was describing how the Hartwell analysis had changed the company's direction. He was using words like visionary and exceptional thinking. I kept my face still. I chewed my food slowly. I breathed normally. Then Mr. Obi turned his eyes toward Femi and nodded warmly. Outstanding leadership, Femi. Outstanding. Femi smiled like a man who had earned it. After dessert arrived, Mr. Obi stood again. He liked standing when he spoke. It was something people noticed about him. He believed in looking people in the eye when important things were being said. He began going around the table, saying something specific to each person. A word about their contribution. A recognition. Sometimes a joke. The room was warm with appreciation. People straightened in their chairs when his eyes moved toward them. He reached the head of finance. Then the operations lead. Then 2 members of the marketing team. He was moving in my direction. I felt something shift in my stomach. Not fear exactly. Something closer to alertness. Mr. Obi looked at me and smiled. Emeka, he said. His voice was steady and genuine. Your name came up several times this quarter in performance reviews. People notice your dedication. I want to make sure we are taking care of our strongest contributors. He paused. I trust the performance bonus we approved in September reached you well. I hope it gave you some breathing room. The table went quiet in that natural way tables do when someone important finishes speaking. I held my fork. I looked at Mr. Obi. Then slowly, without planning it, without thinking about consequences or timing or the 11 other people watching, I turned my head and looked directly at Femi Adeyemi. Then I looked back at the CEO. What bonus? I said. Nobody moved. That is what I remember most clearly. 12 people around a table and not one of them moved for what felt like a very long time. The waiter near the door stopped walking. Even the candlelight seemed to pause. Mr. Obi's expression did not change dramatically. He was too experienced for that. But something shifted behind his eyes. A sharpening. The kind that happens when a careful man realizes something is not adding up. The performance bonus, he said again, slowly. Approved by the board in September. 3 months of additional salary for top contributors in your department. Your name was on the list, Emeka. I nodded once. Calmly. I never received it, I said. I did not look at Femi again. I did not need to. I could feel him without looking. I could feel the stillness coming from his direction, the complete and total stillness of a man trying very hard to become invisible inside an expensive suit. The head of HR, a woman named Mrs. Toyin Bakare, set down her wine glass. Her eyes moved toward Femi, then back to Mr. Obi. Mr. Obi picked up his napkin from his lap, folded it once, and set it beside his plate. We will look into this, he said quietly. Those 5 words landed on the table like something heavy. Dinner ended earlier than planned. Mr. Obi thanked everyone warmly, shook hands, smiled the way leaders smile when they are thinking hard about something else. People filtered out in 2s and 3s. The usual end-of-evening conversations happened near the coats and the door. I waited near the far end of the room. I was not in a hurry. I had no way urgent to be. Femi found me before I reached the exit. He came quickly, moving through the last few remaining people with his shoulders pulled slightly forward. His voice was low and tight. Emeka. He stopped close to me. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. That was unnecessary. I looked at him. Was it? I said. You could have come to me privately. You could have asked. His jaw was moving in that way jaws move when someone is working very hard to appear calm. I did ask, I said. In October. You told me the bonus cycle was delayed and that you would follow up. He said nothing. I asked again in November, I continued. You told me HR was processing a backlog. Still nothing. It is December, Femi. He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes had changed. There was something in them I had not seen before in 4 years of working under him. Something that looked very much like the beginning of fear. This is not over, he said quietly. I nodded. No, I said. It is not. I drove home slowly that night. The city moved past my windows in the usual way. Street lights. Late traffic. A food vendor standing alone near a closed intersection. I had taken this same route every night for 4 years. Tonight it felt different. Not lighter, not heavier. Just different. Like the air before rain comes. My phone had 3 messages by the time I parked. The first was from my colleague Nonso Ease. We had started at Pinnacle Solutions around the same time. He was the closest thing I had to a real friend inside that building. His message said only, I saw his face. We need to talk tomorrow. The second message was from an unknown number. It said, this is Mrs. Toyin Bakare. Please come to HR at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Confidential. The third message was from Femi. It was longer. It spoke about loyalty, about professionalism, about how outbursts in front of senior leadership reflected poorly on a person's character. It ended by saying he hoped we could resolve this quietly before it became something larger. I read all 3 messages once. Then I plugged my phone in, poured a glass of water, and sat at my kitchen table in the dark. I was not angry. That surprised me slightly. What I felt was something quieter and more settled. Like a man who has been carrying a heavy bag for a long time and has finally set it down on the ground. Not because the journey is over, but because now he can see clearly what is inside it. I arrived at 8 the next morning. Mrs. Bakare's office was at the end of a corridor on the 6th floor. It had glass walls with frosted lower panels. I could see her outline as I approached. She was already at her desk. She stood when I entered and gestured to the chair across from her. She was a direct woman. That was something I had always respected about her. She did not waste movement or words. Emeka, she said. What you said last night opened something we need to handle carefully. She folded her hands on the desk. The bonus payment in question was transferred to a designated account in September. We have the transaction record. She slid a printed document across the desk. I picked it up and read it. The amount was correct. The date was correct. The account number was not mine. I set the paper down. That is not my account, I said. Mrs. Bakare nodded slowly, like she had already known before I confirmed it. We are aware, she said. Our finance team noticed the irregularity last night after Mr. Obi contacted them. They pulled the full records this morning. She paused. The account the funds were sent to was opened under your employee ID. But the registered phone number and email on that account do not belong to you. I sat very still. They belong to Femi Adeyemi, she said. I want to be honest about something. When Mrs. Bakare said those words, I did not feel the burst of anger that perhaps I should have felt. What I felt instead was a strange and heavy sadness. Not for myself. For the years. For years of early mornings and late reports and carrying work home on weekends and telling myself it was normal. Telling myself this was just how things worked. Telling myself to be patient, that recognition would come eventually. And all that time, he was not just ignoring my contributions. He was actively taking from me. Mrs. Becker was still speaking. She was using words like unauthorized access and misappropriation of funds and disciplinary investigation. Professional words. Careful words. I heard all of them clearly. We will need a formal statement from you, she said. Of course, I said. This process will take some time. I want to be transparent with you. This could go in several directions depending on what the investigation finds. I understand. She looked at me for a moment. Not the professional look of an HR director. Something more personal than that. Are you all right, Emeka? I thought about that question carefully. I will be, I said. I meant it. Word moved through the office the way word always moves through offices. Fast and in all directions at once. By 10 o'clock, I could feel it. People looked at me differently when I walked through the open floor. Some looked away too quickly. Others held the look a beat too long. Nonso appeared at my desk at 10:15 with 2 cups of coffee and sat down without being invited. Finance has been on the 6th floor since 7 this morning, he said quietly. I know, I said. Femi came in late. He went straight to his office and closed the door. Nonso wrapped both hands around his cup. He never closes his door. I nodded. Nonso looked at me steadily. He was not a dramatic person. He chose his words slowly. Emeka, was it only the bonus? I looked at my screen for a moment. No, I said. He exhaled. I told him some of it then. Not everything, but enough. The Hartwell account. The quarterly reports that carried Femi's name. The client presentation I had built from raw data over 11 weeks. The commendation letter the board had sent that Femi had somehow received in his personnel file even though I had written every word of the underlying analysis. Nonso listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat quietly for a moment. How long have you known all of this? He asked. Long enough, I said. By afternoon, Femi had been called to the 6th floor. I did not watch him walk past. I did not need to. But I heard it from Nonso, who had spent most of the day paying attention to things I was choosing not to focus on. I focused on my work instead. There was a new data project that needed structuring. I opened the files, made my notes, built the framework. My hands moved steadily. My mind was clear. Strangely clear. At 2 o'clock, my desk phone rang. It was Mr. Obi's personal assistant. She told me Mr. Obi would like to see me at 4. I said I would be there. I returned to my work. At 3:30, my email pinged. It was from an address I did not recognize at first. Then I looked more carefully. It was an internal address, but one I had never received mail from before. The office of the group director. Above Mr. Obi's level. The email said only that my name had been flagged for a broader performance review that was currently being prepared, and that I would be informed of next steps shortly. I stared at that email for a long moment. Something was moving that I had not started. Something larger than a single dinner conversation. I thought about that quiet stranger in chapter 1 of the story the company had been writing without me. I wondered, for the first time, whether someone had already been watching long before last night. Mr. Obi's office was on the top floor. Wide windows. A city stretched out behind him like a painting. He stood when I entered. That surprised me. He gestured to a seating area near the window rather than the desk. 2 chairs and a small table. More informal. More honest, somehow. Sit, Emeka. Please. I sat today. He studied me for a moment before speaking. I want to apologize, he said. I had not expected that. Not for last night specifically, he continued, but for the system that allowed what happened to you to happen. I should have had stronger visibility into who was actually producing what in this company. He paused. That is a failure of leadership. My leadership. I did not say anything immediately. There are moments that deserve silence before a response. Thank you, I said finally. I have been reviewing your personnel file today, he said, and comparing it to project records. Emeka, a significant amount of work attributed to your department over the past 2 years carries your fingerprints very clearly. Your methodology, your structure. He shook his head slightly. We missed this. Yes, I said simply. He leaned forward. I want to ask you something directly, and I want a direct answer. All right. Why did you stay? I thought about that question for longer than felt comfortable. Why did I stay? For years under a man who was slowly and deliberately taking credit for everything I built. Why had I not gone to HR earlier? Why had I not confronted Femi directly? Why had I not simply left and taken my skills somewhere they would be properly recognized? Because I believed in the work, I said finally. Mr. Obi waited. I was not staying for Femi. I was staying for the problems I was solving. The Hartwell analysis mattered. The supply chain modeling we did in the second year mattered. I cared about the outcomes. I paused. I told myself the recognition would come eventually. I kept believing that. And when it did not, I adjusted. I documented. I kept records of everything I built. Every version, every timestamp, every communication. Something moved in Mr. Obi's expression. You kept records, he said slowly. Yes. Of everything. Yes. He sat back in his chair. He was quiet for a moment. Emeka, he said carefully. I need to ask you to share those records with our investigation team. All of them. I already emailed them to Mrs. Bakir this morning, I said. Before our 8 o'clock meeting. I have been keeping them organized for 14 months. Mr. Obi looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Slowly. Like a man who had just understood something important. The investigation moved faster than I expected. By the end of the following week, the picture was complete. The unauthorized account. The redirected bonus payment. The pattern of misattributed work going back 22 months. My documentation had filled in every gap. Timestamps on files. Email chains where Femi had received my drafts and submitted them unchanged with his name added at the top. Version histories on shared drives that showed clearly who had built what and when. HR called it comprehensive. The word they used more than once in their written summary was irrefutable. Femi was placed on immediate suspension pending a formal board review. His access to company systems was removed the same afternoon. I was told he had denied everything initially. Then, when the file records were shown to him, he had stopped talking entirely and requested that the company's legal team be present. I heard all of this from Mrs. Bakir in a follow-up meeting. She delivered the information carefully and professionally. But near the end of our conversation, she said something that stayed with me. The bonus was only the beginning of what we found, she said. He had been rerouting small commissions from 2 other junior analysts as well. For over a year. I thought about that for a moment. Do they know? I asked. They are being contacted today. I nodded slowly. I had carried my own weight for 4 years. I had not known, until that moment, that others had been carrying his weight too. Nonso took me out for a meal that Friday evening. Nothing expensive. A place near the office where they made pepper soup the way my grandmother used to make it. We sat in a corner booth. He ordered for both of us without asking because he had known my order for 4 years. How do you feel? He asked. Strange, I said honestly. Strange how? I thought about it. Like I was in a dark room for a long time. And now the lights are on. And the room is the same room. But everything looks different because now I can actually see it properly. Nonso nodded. Are you angry? He asked. Sometimes, I said. In the mornings mostly. I wake up and I think about specific moments. A meeting where he dismissed my idea and then proposed the same idea 2 weeks later. An email chain where I explained a solution and then watched him take that solution to the senior team as his own discovery. I shook my head. In those moments I feel it. But I documented everything. I protected myself even when I did not know I would need it. That is the thing that pulls me back from the anger. Nonso was quiet for a moment. You were ready, he said. I was ready, I agreed. He raised his glass. To being ready, he said. I raised mine. The board review concluded 3 weeks after the dinner. Femi Adeyemi was dismissed. The company recovered the redirected bonus through a legal process I was not involved in directly. I received a formal letter confirming that the full amount, plus interest as a gesture of acknowledgement, had been deposited into my actual account. I read that letter twice. Then I put it in the same folder where I kept all my other documentation. 2 days later, I was called to a meeting I had not been told much about. The email said only that it would be held in the main boardroom and that Mr. Obi would be present along with 2 other senior directors. I wore my good suit, the one I had bought last year for my cousin's wedding. It fit better than the old one. The boardroom was quiet when I entered. Mr. Obi sat at the head of the table. Beside him was the group director, a man named Mr. Chike Okafor, who I had only ever seen from a distance. On Mr. Obi's other side was the head of strategy, Mrs. Amoran Wachukwu. They all stood when I entered. That had not happened at the dinner. Something was different in this room. I could feel it before anyone said a word. The kind of difference that comes right before a moment that changes the shape of the next few years of your life. Mr. Okafor spoke first. He was a calm man. The kind of calm that comes not from silence but from not needing to prove anything. Emeka, he said, we have spent considerable time over the past 3 weeks reviewing your full body of work at Pinnacle Solutions. Not just the Hartwell account. Everything. He slid a bound document across the table toward me. I picked it up. It was a compiled performance review. 41 pages. My name on the cover. We found, he continued, that your contribution to this company over 4 years has been substantially and deliberately obscured. He paused. What you have actually built is extraordinary, and we should have seen it far sooner. Mrs. Nwachukwu spoke next. We are creating a new position, she said. Head of Data Intelligence. It would sit at the senior leadership level. Cross-departmental. Full authority over how data strategy shapes company decisions. She looked at me steadily. We would like you to consider taking it. I held the document in my hands. I thought about the dark room. I thought about 4 years of mornings and the drive home and the folder of timestamps on my personal laptop. I thought about Nonso's pepper soup and my grandmother's voice and my mother telling me that quiet people see everything. I looked at Mr. Okafor. Can I ask you something? I said. Please, he said. When did you first start paying attention? I asked. Mr. Okafor and Mr. Obi exchanged a brief look. The kind of look that happens between people who have already discussed something and agreed on how much to share. Mr. Obi answered. Longer than you might expect, he said. The Hartwell presentation troubled me. Not because it was wrong. It was exceptional. But there was something about the way Femi presented it that did not match. The depth of the answers he gave to questions did not match the depth of the work itself. He paused. When a man builds something truly, he can answer questions about every corner of it. Femi could not. I said nothing. I started asking quiet questions, Mr. Obi continued. To people in your department. To people in connected departments. What I heard, carefully and gradually, painted a picture I needed to verify before acting. And the dinner? I asked. The bonus question was genuine, he said. I genuinely believed you had received it. Your reaction told me everything I needed to know about where it had gone. I sat with that for a moment. So you were already watching, I said. We were already concerned, he said carefully. But Emeka, you handed us the truth in one sentence. In front of witnesses. In a way that could not be denied or softened. He looked at me with something that felt like respect. That took courage. It was not courage, I said honestly. It was just the truth. I took 24 hours before giving my answer about the position. I went home that evening and sat at my kitchen table the way I had sat after the dinner. In the quiet. In the dark. Thinking carefully. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring the way she always did, like she had been expecting the call. I told her everything. From the beginning. The years of working in Femi's shadow. The documentation. The dinner. The investigation. The boardroom meeting. She listened the way she always listened. Completely. Without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Emeka, she said finally. You already know what you want to do. You are calling me to hear yourself say it out loud. I smiled. Yes, I said. Then say it. I want to take it. The position. Not because of what was taken from me, but because the work I would be doing matters and I am the right person to do it. There it is, she said. There it is, I agreed. She laughed softly. A warm sound. The kind that travels easily across phone lines and long distances. My son, she said. Your father would have said this was your character showing up for you. I did not say anything for a moment. Tell me what he would have meant by that, I said. He would have meant, she said gently, that a person's character is always preparing them for something, even when they cannot see what it is yet. I accepted the position the following morning. The formal announcement went out to the company 2 days later. A carefully worded internal email from Mr. Obi that acknowledged the restructuring of the data department, the creation of the new senior leadership role, and my appointment to it. It did not mention Femi by name. It did not need to. I read the email from my regular desk. My same chair. My same monitor. I would be moving to a different office at the end of the month. But that morning I wanted to sit in my regular place and read the email like any other person reading company news. Nonso appeared at my desk within 4 minutes of the email going out. He said nothing. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and a look on his face that made me want to laugh and also not laugh at the same time. I know, I said. You knew this whole time, he said. I knew what I had built, I said. I did not know what would happen with it. He nodded slowly. The junior analysts on the 3rd floor, he said. The ones whose commissions were also taken. They have been asking about you. I know. I have a meeting with them next week. He raised his eyebrows slightly. You are already managing things. I am trying to, I said. He pulled up a chair and sat beside me. What do you need from me? He asked. That was the most useful question anyone had asked me in a long time. My first week as head of data intelligence was quieter than I expected. I had imagined more noise, more visible change. What I found instead was that the change had already happened. The investigation had shifted something in the way people moved around me. Not dramatically, but clearly. People came to my desk differently. Not with the absent greeting of colleagues passing through. With actual questions. Real questions. About data structures, about methodology, about how to approach a problem they had been circling without finding the right entry point. I answered all of them. I did not rush any of them. I remembered what it felt like to have a question and no one to ask. The 2 junior analysts Nonso had mentioned, Uche Martins and BC Adegok, came to see me midweek. They were young. Careful in the way people become careful when they have learned that workplaces are not always fair. We talked for over an hour. I told them what I had told no one except Nonso. About the documentation. About keeping records. About the difference between waiting for someone to notice your value and quietly building evidence of it. Uche asked me at one point how I had stayed patient for so long. I thought about my mother's words. Character preparing for something, I said. He looked uncertain. It means, I said, that how you behave when nothing seems to be going right is exactly what gets you ready for when everything changes. 3 months into the new role, Mr. Okafor asked me to present at the company's annual strategy meeting. Not as a supporting voice. As a lead presenter. 40 minutes. Senior leadership, department heads, board observers. I prepared for 2 weeks. Not because I was nervous. Because I respected what the presentation needed to be. I built it the same way I built everything. From the data outward. From evidence to insight to recommendation. Nonso reviewed my slides the evening before. This is the Hartwell account, he said quietly, looking at one section. The Hartwell methodology, I said, applied to a broader question. He nodded slowly. You built this years ago, he said. I built the foundation years ago, I said. This is what it was always pointing toward. The morning of the strategy meeting I arrived early. The room was large and arranged formally. I set up my materials. I tested the display. I poured water into my glass slowly and set it to the right of the podium. People filed in. Senior faces I recognized and some I did not. Mr. Obi entered and nodded at me from across the room. Then Mr. Okafor stood at the front. Today, he said, we begin with something that should have had this platform much sooner. He gestured toward me. Emeka Juru, head of data intelligence. I walked to the front of the room. The room was quiet. I began to speak. The presentation went well. That is the simple way to say it. The fuller way is that something happened in that room that I had not fully anticipated. 40 minutes into explaining the data framework I had built, I looked up from my slides and saw the room differently than I had when I started. People were not just listening. They were leaning forward, asking questions before I invited them, connecting what I was saying to problems their own departments had been sitting with for months without a clear approach. The head of operations, a serious woman named Mrs. Folake Oho, stopped me partway through my 3rd section. Is this what you used on the Hartwell account? She asked directly. A version of it, I said. Could it be applied to our supply forecasting problem? Yes, I said. I already have preliminary thoughts on how. She looked at Mr. Okafor briefly, then back at me. After this meeting, she said. It was not a question. I finished the presentation. The room responded in a way that I will not try to overstate, but also will not minimize. There was a feeling at the end that something had been settled. Something that had been unsettled for long enough. Mr. Obi found me afterward near the window. Do you remember, he said quietly, at the dinner when you asked what bonus? Yes, I said. That single question, he said, may be the most valuable thing this company needed to hear. 4 months after the dinner, I received a message I had not expected. It came through the company's internal system. The name attached to it was Femi Adeyemi. His account had been deactivated, but the message had been submitted through the legal correspondence channel during the settlement process. I read it in my office with the door closed. It was not long. It did not contain an apology exactly. It contained something more complicated than an apology. A kind of accounting. He wrote that he had told himself for years that he was simply leveraging team contributions the way all managers did. That the line had been blurry and he had not noticed when he crossed it. Then he wrote something I read twice. The truth is I was afraid of you. From the beginning. I knew what you were capable of and I did not know how to be in the same room with it without feeling small. So I made sure the room could not see it. I sat with that for a long time. Fear. That was what had been behind 4 years of being overlooked and taken from. Not malice exactly. Fear dressed up as authority. Fear making decisions wearing a manager's title. I did not respond to the message. There was nothing I needed to say. But I understood something important in reading it. Understanding is not the same as forgiving. It is not the same as forgetting. But it is something. It closes a door in a way that anger cannot. 6 months after the dinner, Nonso was promoted to senior analyst. I had recommended him. Not out of loyalty, though loyalty existed. But because I had watched him for 4 years and I knew exactly what he was capable of, and I believed in saying so clearly and at the right time. He came to my office when he found out. You recommended me, he said. Yes, I said. You did not tell me. You did not need to know beforehand. You needed to be recognized for what you had already done, not for what I said about it. He sat down. Is that how it is supposed to work? He asked. That is how I believe it should work, I said. People build something real. Someone who sees it clearly says so to the people who can act on it. That is what recognition is supposed to be. He was quiet for a moment. Is that what should have happened for you? He asked. Yes, I said. But it happened late. And I would rather it happen late than not at all. I looked at him. And I would rather make sure it happens on time for the people around me now. Uche and Bisi received formal commendations the same month. For work they had done. Work that had their actual names on it. They came to thank me. I told them I had done nothing. The work already existed. I had only made sure it was seen. A year after the dinner at that expensive restaurant with the white tablecloths and the forks that cost more than groceries, I sat at my desk on a quiet Tuesday morning. No drama. No announcement. Just me and my coffee and a new data project open on my screen. Outside my window the city was doing what cities do. Moving. Continuing. I thought about the question Mr. Obi had asked me in his office. Why did you stay? I had given him an honest answer then. I stayed because I believed in the work. But sitting in my office a year later, I understood something more about that answer. I stayed because somewhere in me, underneath the patience and the quiet and the documentation and the long mornings, I believed in something harder to name. I believed that character was not invisible forever. That what a person actually builds does not disappear just because someone else puts their name on it. That the truth of a thing survives. It does not always arrive on time. It is not always clean when it arrives. But it arrives. I picked up my coffee. I looked at my screen. I opened the new project file and began the work the way I always begin work. Carefully. From the foundation outward. One layer at a time. My name was on it. In the end, my name had always been on the work. Now everyone could finally see it. Public credit first, but by who consistently builds value with discipline, patience, and integrity even when unseen. Emeka's journey shows that systems may fail, people may take shortcuts, and recognition may be delayed, but truth anchored in documented work and consistent excellence cannot be permanently erased. It also highlights the danger of leadership without accountability, where fear and insecurity can distort fairness and harm others. Ultimately, the lesson is that silence is not weakness when it is paired with preparation, and patience is not passivity when it is backed by evidence and self-respect. Real power belongs not to those who take credit, but to those who build substance, maintain character under pressure, and remain ready for the moment when truth finally becomes visible. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more. Thank you for watching.